Natalie and Zoolander. Take one, action.
There you go. Thank you. And we always throw it on the floor. Okay, here we go. Yo, what do they call me? They call me Devin Zoolander. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah, they call me Devin Zoolander. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I look good on camera. You know I look good on camera, yo. What's up? It's your homie, Devin Zoolander, coming all the way live from my domicile. And before I start to introduce our guest, I have to put on some kind of cool, jazzy instrumental because you know how I get down. I just can't just talk. I have to be extra because that's what I am, extra. So let's see. Let me just put on a beat real quick so I can set the mood. All right. Ah, yes, the classic. Excuse me. All right. Yes. And we're back. Had a quick delay real quick, but I had to get myself right before I could properly introduce our guest. Now, the woman sitting to my right is a socially conscious journalist, a media personality, and a digital media consultant. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of that might sound a wee bit redundant, but trust me, they all mean different things. Just because the word media is used twice, it doesn't mean that they're the same thing. She is a regular guest contributor to KDKA 1020 AM radio, and she has appeared regularly on national media platforms such as Fox News and XM Radio. A Pittsburgh native with bachelor degrees in both biology and philosophy, she was accepted to medical school in 2007 but declined her seat to follow her creative passions. She holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Pittsburgh and ran her own online lifestyle magazine for 5 years before working as a licensed mobile therapist. The woman that will bring you the Ask Natalie advice column, 5 minutes, and also Heating Up with Leandra Mira. Without further ado, please put your hands together for the one and only Natalie Bencivenga.
That was quite an introduction.
Oh yeah. Well, you know that. I mean, that's what we do here. You know, at the Devin Zoolander show. You know, we don't play around. We got to make sure that our people know that you matter and your story matters, and all that work you put into writing your bio, it matters because somebody read it.
And you did, and for that I am grateful because you're probably the first.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, it makes my job easier when I can like easily look at things that someone is doing online and I can pull from them instead of being like, so Natalie, what's your story? Like, what kind of guys you like? What kind of people do you like? What kind of places do you like to go? Like now we actually can. Oh, you mean we got real stuff to talk about? All right, cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show, by the way.
Oh yeah, you are so welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're so understanding because as you can see, there was a lot of setup that had to happen in order for us to get to this point. But I thank you for being understanding throughout the whole process.
Well, I have to say I was very impressed by the ambition level of all of the cameras that we have going right now. This is pretty amazing. So good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will pat myself on the back.
You should.
Yeah, because it's important for us to do that because you know how this is as being a creative person yourself. Like you have all these big picture dreams. You're a visionary and you're in some ways you can be a bit of an idealist and you're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to change the world. But then when you go to do something simple like turn on the camera and say, okay, I want you to work. I don't want you to be blurry footage. I want you to record all of my audio and I want it to look fire so I can just put it up and be like, yo, NatalieBencivenga.com, get like me. But then it messes your whole swagger up when technology is like, nah, dog, like I don't feel like working right now. So you understand.
I do understand. And I think people don't understand though that the magic that they see is that final product is hours and hours of just stress and exhaustion on back end, having to edit this and go through all this footage. Like you have so much to do. I was actually thinking about that watching you set up and I'm like, this poor man has so much in a post that he's going to have to do to deal with all this. So I'm really impressed that you really are taking this to such a big level.
Absolutely.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you. I definitely appreciate that because it can be a really thankless job. Even when, like yourself, you've done some national media programs and you've won some awards. Still, you know that, okay, that's cool and everything, but just because I've been recognized a couple times, that doesn't mean that I've arrived. Like, I'm ambitious.
Oh my gosh, I in no way feel that I have arrived in any capacity. I'm constantly just that scrappy energy, I guess, of just, okay, what's next? Where do I go next? What can I do next? Who can I include? Who can I showcase? I'm always thinking about the next project, which is part of being a journalist, right? Because you live in the future, because you're constantly looking at things, what's coming next, what's going to trend next. Who do I need to know? Who do I need to interview? What's coming down the pipe? What's going to be important to people, not today, but in 10 days from now, in a month from now, in a year from now. So you're always trying to get ahead of things. So a lot of times you miss where you're actually at. And one of my friends, Julius Boatwright, who is an incredible mental health therapist and the founder of Steel Smiling Pittsburgh, I remember one time he and I, a couple years ago, we were hosting TEDx Pittsburgh. And God love him. I mean, I made him write, like, we wrote like a whole script. It was the first time it had been scripted. I mean, he's a good friend for going through all that with me. But I remember backstage, we were about 5 minutes away from going on, and I started talking to him about something I had going on next week. And he said, Natalie, just take a minute. Let's close our eyes and let's just breathe in this moment. I had never done that on a professional space before. I was like, Julius, you're not just a pretty face, are you?
Yeah.
You know things.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to get ahead of yourself and not be present. Do you find that to be true with your work?
Definitely. I feel that. So I think for me, sometimes in interviewing people, especially when they're right here, even when I wake up at I can wake up like 8 or 9 in the morning and know I have an interview at 1 and know that, okay, I'm going to make sure that all my memory cards have enough storage space on them so that they don't just shut off while I'm doing this interview with Natalie, or I'm making sure that I mount all the cameras on the tripods and that I do this and that. But then, you know, out of nowhere, it goes from like 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and you realize, wait, I haven't put on my makeup. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. And then it's just like, oh, Natalie just pulled up. And I think that sometimes, I don't know if I get a lot of stuff from Meme University. I still do research on stuff too, but I can't act like Meme University or like Wikipedia don't exist, because they give us at least some initial information. But I think it was a meme where it was talking about how like perfectionism is actually like a drug, and it's actually problematic when it's taken too literally, and it can definitely induce some anxiety inside of you. And when you're sitting right here, even though you're a nice person, I'm glad to have your time, I'm glad that you're so understanding, we all have that moment, even the most patient of us, where we're like, where we start tapping our wrist and it's like, all right, come on now. And for me, just knowing that aura is hanging over me as I'm trying to fix stuff in real time with just being a one-man show, it can be tough. So I definitely, like you say, I've met Julius a couple times. I was his Uber driver once. He did.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is so small.
It's so small, and I've attended one of his trainings before, because he had, I think it was a training for when we were working with students at the time, and working with students through different mental health challenges that might come up, and they might tell us something like I'm depressed, or even more extreme like I'm suicidal, something like that, and just knowing like how to talk with them through it in a way that's not judging them, that is not putting them on a defense, that is just more of, okay, I'm being your ears and I'm just allowing you to just kind of word vomit and say things. So to go back to it, Julius is excellent at recommending something as simple as breathing, but we don't do it. So when he says you should do it, he says that because he knows that we don't do it enough, and it helps.
Well, and I love your comment on perfectionism, because I myself fall into that trap often. And I remember when I was editing one of the first episodes of Heating Up, I couldn't finish because I kept finding new things I needed to fix. There was something else. And at one point, one of my colleagues, she said to me, Natalie, better to be done than perfect. And I thought, oh, wow, from a media perspective, from somebody that works in media and breathes and lives this, sometimes you're never going to get to that perfect, and you aren't ever going to get to the perfect end product. And sometimes good enough is perfect. And especially when you're talking about like doing things on deadline and time constraints, you have to make concessions. You know, even when you watch something back and you're like, it's not perfect, but I did a thing. Like, it's out in the universe now. Like, people can watch this, they can experience this. And sometimes I don't think we give ourselves enough credit just for being able to accomplish something in this medium.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And to build on what you're saying, I think that we also have to understand that we can orchestrate something perfectly. The technology works. The guest is on time. I didn't have any lapses in my thinking. I asked all the right questions. You can do that, and someone can still look at your interview and be like, that wasn't that good. So what we have to do is, like, we can't win that battle, because if we're sloppy, or to our standards, if we feel like we're sloppy with what we're putting out, somebody's going to say something. If we're perfect, someone is still going to say something. So we can't get too caught up in that.
Well, and I love that, and I remember, you know, when you put yourself out there, you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be prepared for people just being mad at you in general. Yeah. But, you know, I always say to myself when it starts to weigh on me, it is easy to stand on the sidelines and critique. I'm doing the damn thing. If you really want to comment here, get in here with me and do this. And then I will take your constructive criticism seriously, because it's a lot easier to consult with people in your industry and say, this is what's working, this is what's not. I can take that much more seriously than people just shooting their mouths off at me on social media, where it's like, okay, that's cool, but I'm doing it, so get out of my way.
Right. Because I'll give you like an example. Like, I know, so recently there was a versus battle between Fat Joe and Ja Rule, and I watched it and I was thoroughly entertained. But there was one part where it went a little sideways when instead of Fat Joe just kind of attacking Ja Rule man to man, Ja Rule brought some women that were out on his hit songs Lil Mo and Vita that were on Put It On Me, and he brought them out to perform. As soon as they left the stage, instead of Fat Joe being like, man, that song was trash, that was corny, and just talking about the song, or saying, Ja Rule, you're not even that cool, my album is better than yours, he went to a place that was completely uncalled for, and he started attacking the women, saying like, oh, y'all are bees, or y'all dusty, you know, it looked like, where you get them from, Ja? It looked like you got them from a crack house. And it's just like, none of that had anything to do with what was going on. And I'm not saying that if the women had said something to Fat Joe first that was disrespectful, that would have warranted him going below the belt. But at least then it's like, okay, Natalie, you just hit me, so I hit you back. But nobody hit anybody. You just like... That's all deflection, right? And that's basically what you just explained was a great metaphor or analogy for social media. It's just all deflection. And it's so much easier to go on social media and say things without context, or just put out nonsense, than it is to actually take in, you know, your own space and talk about it from your perspective. It's fascinating to me. So yeah, that's a good way of sort of putting it out there. Right. So what happened after that is that I posted about it on Facebook, and then someone jumped in my comments and they were basically trying to defend Fat Joe, who has already apologized. So my thing is, if he apologized, but once again, we live in a world where everybody always has an agenda, and you don't want to upset this community. That's the way that some of us live. So what we think is like, oh, he only did that to protect his money, or because his image was going to take a hit. Now, I'm not going to lie. Those are definitely, the bigger you get in business, like, yeah, you would like to think, oh, because I care as a person. But honestly, I'm past the point of thinking, oh, you did that because you're a good person. Did you do the right thing? Like, even if it was disingenuous or insincere, sometimes, like, you just got to kind of admit, like, all right, I messed up, and move on so that you can get back to doing what you're doing. What I realized is that when I was going back and forth with the guy in the comments that was trying to defend Fat Joe's comments, I realized that, you know what, I'm taking away from myself because I have this platform here. And just like the same way, you know how it is, you write a status and you put your heart and soul into it. And sometimes it's not so much that you're looking for 100% agreement, but you're just looking to express yourself, people to like it, people to maybe comment and say like, oh, I agree with this, or I didn't know that, but you're not really looking to debate. You're saying, I said what I said and that's it. But the way people do sometimes, they want to go back and forth. And that's why I like what you say, like, yo, you can actually write your own status, create your own show, do your own platform, invite your own guests on and put it out there what you want to do, instead of trying to hijack mine. Because if I disagree with you, I can be like, I don't know about that, Natalie. But chances are, whatever you're speaking on, if it's issues with like social justice, if it's issues pertaining to women's rights, if it's issues pertaining to a myriad of different issues that you've researched a lot, then really what is the point of me telling you publicly that I don't agree with that, and I don't really have the intellectual like backup to be able to say why? So social media, it's like a necessary evil.
It is. I agree with that. And what's interesting too is when I look back at some of the work that I've put out there, and you grow as you go. You do. You evolve, you change your thoughts, you expand your mind, or at least I hope you do. But when I look at stuff and I see what people comment on, I used to read my comments. Oh, stop doing that, especially on the advice column, right?
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that once I put it out there, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's actually not me anymore, and it's not about me. Once it's out there, I've released it into the universe, and however people interpret that, that has nothing to do with me. Because the truth of it is, when you do a show, when you produce a show, when you write a column, these things don't identify who I am. They are a part of who I am. But you don't know me from an hour on a podcast. You don't know me reading my advice column. You may think you have sort of a kindredness, or maybe you feel very, opposite of where I am, but that's your interpretation of the work. It's sort of like being an artist. I'm not a visual artist. I applaud visual artists because they're just amazing.
Yeah, they're amazing.
But at the same time, it's all creativity, right? So their art hanging on a wall can be interpreted a million ways. Who knows what the Mona Lisa was actually about?
Yeah.
We'll never know, right? Just to use a very well-known example. But it's the same thing when you put out your work. This is just a part of who you are. This is an experience you want to share, but this isn't you.
Right.
And I think it's important to recognize that when we're working in this medium, and when we have friends working in this medium, and when we have nemesis
yes,
in this medium, right? Whether they're huge celebrities or people we know locally, that's not who they are. That's who they're projected to be.
Right. Very much like everybody's social media. Like we're showing you what we want you to see. Right. And that's why we have to kind of take with a grain of salt. If someone is saying something like this is something that they've thought about and they've carefully choreographed to look a certain way. And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that, because marketing still matters. Advertising, PR, all that stuff still matters. So it's not to say that, oh, you just put a positive spin on that. Well, yeah, my company, somebody higher up at my company got in trouble, and they need to be able to move on from this tough situation to get back to leading the company. So you might think like, well, I don't agree with what they did, or I don't agree with what they said. However, there still is value in people that are able to say, okay, we're at ground zero right now. It can't get any worse. What are some things that we can do to help rebuild your image? And as somebody that studied communications in undergrad, and someone that just tries to pay attention to tone, because we always know that it's not always what you say, it's how you say it a lot of times. Like, it's really important. It still is. There's nothing sinful about you putting out what you want to put out. Just know that I'm also imploring you, empowering you to do the same, because at a certain point, I got things to do, and I can't be going back and forth with you like that.
Well, what do you think of sort of the democratization of media, in the sense that I think it's become a double-edged sword, right? Where on the one hand...
Okay, if you could hold up real quick.
Yeah.
I see that we have several cameras that have stopped, so I'm going to restart them and give you an opportunity to re-ask your question about the democratization of media, which I'm going to figure out what that means in my head. I'm just listening to context clues and be like, oh, yeah.
I'm gonna explain.
You're gonna break it down,
just for the audience, not for you, but for the audience.
Yeah,
and then you can share with me what you think of that phrase, because it may be interpreted differently in your mind.
Definitely.